Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for not being here earlier. This is an important hearing, and certainly appreciate all the witnesses being here and the attention to detail. And Mr. Higgins, it's good to see you. I know that we fought another battle together to make sure that ratepayers and taxpayers got a fair deal after a lot of market manipulation. So it gives me some degree of comfort to know that you're helping in this, although I'd have to say this recent run-up in debt securities where the hedge funds are profiting off of this is some of the frustration that at least we were concerned about before. And to me, it's shameful. We're trying to get something done here at taxpayer expense, and so, but we'll save this to a different oversight hearing about that operation. But I did want to go to, I did put out a larger statement that I won't go into now, but Mr. Walker, I wanted to go back to, I know some of my colleagues while I was sitting here were asking about the blackout condition. What was the main cause of that?
Based on the information we know and when that happened, working with Mr. Higgins, the thing that I think people neglect when looking at it is the system is not in its normal state. By virtue of there's two main transmission lines that go from the south to the north on the 230 kV system. One of those lines is out and being worked on, which places all of the or the majority of the north-south corridor basically relying on that one line. And the relays are set and designed to operate with the system in basically its normal state. The system is not in its normal state for a variety of different reasons, including that transmission line that they're working on. And it's surmised, and I think Mr. Higgins, his team has done more, and I know he's been working with folks from NYPA, relay experts, to look at the details. But it looks like there's an overtrip mechanism or overtrip of the relays based on the abnormal state of the grid. And maybe, well, if you want to add any more.
I think Assistant Secretary Walker's comment, Senator, is very appropriate, that the grid is very weak right now because a number of lines are still out, but notably one of the main transport lines to take power from the south to the north. When an incident occurred that caused a protective action to start on an adjacent line, the way the relays were set, which was probably right for the normal system, caused the entire an entire set of lines to trip off, and then you suddenly had a mismatch, and an electric system can't handle a mismatch for very long, and then things start tripping. So as a result of that, we just didn't have enough generation in the northern part of the island to hold the load. Therefore, everything started to trip. That's just the way it protects the system by turning things off before they're damaged.
Was this something that was originally fixed in the, or reset, if you will? No?
Not to my knowledge.
So this didn't have anything to do with whitefish?
No, no. This is, the issue starts with not enough generation in the north and too much in the south. And then the second thing, that when the grid is in a bad condition, which it is right now, until that second line is built, then you're vulnerable to almost any kind of incident. And then third, we really have to look at, and this is what the Department of Energy is currently helping us with, as were the NYPA workers, the NYPA relay and protection experts. Are there things that we could do to better operate in these abnormal conditions that exist right now? So we're getting help on all three fronts.
Okay. To this proposal on the Energy Commission and changes to it, to me, it would put the reforms, I don't know that any utility operates this way in the United States. Basically considering what NARUC recommends as far as, you know, an energy commission. Mr. Alexander, do you think this will make us less or more independent, this effective independent regulator?
Man, that's not an area that the Corps usually delves into, so I don't have an informed opinion.
Okay, Mr. Higgins, do you have any comments?
As the recipient of regulatory activity in many, many places I've lived in my life, I believe that nothing is better for a customer in the long run than a fair, firm, strong, well-managed regulatory entity, and nothing is better for a utility. At the end of the day, the customers get better rates, better reliability, and the utility knows what the rules are and they operate by it.
Well, I guess that's why I would be concerned about having all of the appointees and then being able, by one entity and then being able to ignore it as well as being somewhat concerning. So, but again, that's something that we will have to, keep our eye on and watch carefully for the future. So my colleagues were discussing distributed generation. Do you think that we have enough in place now to focus on that, given this load issue?
Senator, do you mean enough distributed generation?
Enough in the framework of discussion, not so much in distributed generation, but my colleagues were asking, which I think is a viable question. It's a viable question. We have this all the time as it relates to FERC and its oversight. Given some of the changes that are being recommended, do you think that there's a framework that exists within Puerto Rico to properly vet and incent distributed generation?
I think more work will have to be done to make that work well in Puerto Rico. Regulatory work, perhaps legislative work, and certainly work within PREPA. But we do need distributed generation, and it will be adopted, I believe, as a result of the integrated resource planning process.
Okay, would you get back to us on what legislative ideas you think we might need to make that a reality? Because to me, this is, look, I know all our colleagues, well, actually, I don't know what all our colleagues think, but I hear them, and a lot of them think, oh, well, this tragedy happened, and now we're going to build this most resilient grid. And as Mr. Walker just said, we basically got the grid up and running to the best of our ability, okay? Now, we know that hurricane season is about to hit again, and so people are going to come back to us and say, well, wait, I thought we built the most resilient grid. No, we put some money towards that. But obviously, we all know that distributed generation could help in the reliability of this. Listen, the chair and I want to get about rebuilding our own grid and making it smarter. We hope our House colleagues will help us get a bill at some point in time. But I think that the key thing now for us in Puerto Rico is to make sure that the regulatory process does allow for some distributed generation that would help us with resiliency. And so if there are barriers to that, I certainly want to know, and I would think some of my colleagues would as well.
Senator, I do not mean to imply any federal actions needed. Mr. Sobrino talked about several legislative initiatives in Puerto Rico about policies, and that's the kind of thing that might be needed to really make this work.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, Madam Chair.